Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Brecht Palombo. Brecht, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Brecht comes to us from Alt Reports, his new business venture he's working on that we're going to get into. And I had the chance to be on Brecht's show recently, so I'm not sure which show will come out first. But Brecht, tell us what you're up to today.
Today, I am exploring what to do with your money at Alt Reports. So, last year I had sort of a big exit, like a business event, and found myself a little bit flat-footed on what to do with proceeds, and started talking to a lot of folks, and really opened up the sphere of stuff that I was looking at, which led me to thinking, well, if I've been as involved in money and business as I have been, and all this stuff is sort of dark to me, and I haven't ever seen any of it, then there must be people who would want to know how the private markets and that sort of investing all happens. And so that's sort of the journey that I've started with Alt Reports and the newsletter over there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's right up my alley, right up our alley as far as the listeners go. I mean, it's I'm in a mastermind group called the Passive Income Mastermind, and that's what we talk about is what to do with money.
Yeah.
And dealing with the non-public asset classes and strategies that are out there that most people don't even know about, or if they do, like you've alluded to, if they do, they've scratched the surface. They might have heard of a self-directed IRA or something and realize that you can put your money in a multifamily project, but other than that, I mean, there's a whole world that's most people are unaware of. So there's
private.
an untapped market there. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's private, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. But so tell us a little bit more about, if you would, I don't know how much you can talk about it, but your sale of your business and previously, and kind of give us maybe the last 2 or 3 years of your life, an overview of what that looked like.
Oof. Okay. Last 2 or 3 years. Well, I feel like I should go back 12 years, but we'll start the last 2 or 3. So yeah, last October 8th, I sold a business that I had built over the prior 12 years.
Okay.
And it's an online business in the real estate space. It was called, or still is called, DistressedPro.com. It's in good hands now with some other, the acquirers. And what happened was over the last couple of years, well, let me back up about 7 years. About 7 years ago, I had got my online business to a point where I no longer had to be any particular place in order to run it. And so I started the business in 2009. And then in February of 2014, I sort of found myself, now I was financially free or whatever. I was making good, solid 6 figures, and automatically, like rebills, recurring revenue and all that. And
how much work were you putting in at that point yourself?
Well, see, that's kind of the thing that I found, was that I was still doing the daily grind. So I was living in New England, which was where I was born and raised. And every day I'd get up, and from 8 to whatever, 6, I'd go to this desk and just, be at it no matter, what was going on. And then I remember a friend of mine had moved to Colorado, and he posted a picture, this, bluebird, like blue sky day, powder. I'm a big skier. He's out skiing, and I'm like, what am I doing here? It's like 38 and raining, and it's dark, and like I've never wanted to be here. I'm only here because I was born here. There's no other reason for me to be here. And I really kind of just like broke down. and found myself like very depressed,
Hmm.
even after having what a lot of people would consider to be like, you know,
Successful.
success. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And so at that point, I was like, all right, well, I had a podcast at the time called Bootstrapped with Kids, where I had been recording for a couple of years, like the chronology of this and in the building of the business. And so I said, well, I got to change this. Like, I can't be
Hmm.
weeping at my desk. You know what I mean? Um, that's there's no reason for it. Like,
Sure.
I shouldn't be feeling like this. And so I talked on the podcast about that. That I was going to move, and I sort of made a commitment. I just like
Hmm.
up and made a commitment, and then the ball started rolling. So after that, like I'll just give it's a lot of story. I'll condense into a small bit, but that was in February or March. By August, we had sold everything that we had, literally everything that we had, or dropped it off at Goodwill, and packed ourselves into a van and a trailer, three kids and a
Hmm.
dog,
Wow.
and we drove off with sort of loose plans. That turned into about a 15-month trip.
Huh. Wow.
We ended up landing in Bend, Oregon, eventually, and it was really having to prepare for that kind of travel that completely changed my mindset and the business. And it
Hmm.
demanded that instead of just getting up and grinding away, at the
Hmm.
computer every day, that I would have to be much more deliberate in what I
Hmm.
was doing, that I would have to
Sure.
only do um, the things that really mattered, and that I would have to allow other people to do the things that they could do
Hmm.
to run the business,
Sure.
which was kind of a major letting go period for me.
Yeah.
And so that 7 years ago now landed me in Bend, Oregon, and and I got to say that I've been pretty blessed here. I
Hmm.
ski 70 to 100 days a year, depending on
Wow.
what we've got going. I'm a big cyclist. I ride 150 days a year, something like
Hmm.
that, like
That's
quite a bit,
awesome.
almost every day.
Hmm.
And I'm at home. Yeah, things are really good. I really can't complain.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
last year,
Go
what
ahead.
happened was the way that it came to pass that I sold the business was that I
Yeah.
just got to a point that I had been working on it for so long that, and I just sort of hit a plateau.
Hmm.
And it was still growing, but not at a rate that felt awesome.
Hmm.
And 12 years is a long time to be on anything. And so at that
Sure.
time, when I realized I'd be exiting that business, I really buckled down to really remove myself from it, to the point
Hmm.
where it was 2 half-hour meetings on a Monday, pretty much it,
Hmm.
which allowed me to
That's
really,
awesome.
when I exited that business, from offer to sale is 15 days. And so, that's the first check
Hmm.
over seven figures I've ever received.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was for
Wow.
that business. And I expect there will be more. And
Yeah.
so 15 days, no support. I had one or two follow-up calls with them. Usually when you sell a business, you offer support for months at a
Sure.
time. But I just decided that I was going to completely eliminate myself from that and really empower the team that I had.
Hmm. Hmm.
And doing that really made that business much more valuable and allowed me to step
Just
away.
prior
So
to the sale, you'd
yeah,
enabled and your team to take that ownership and got it.
it was about an
Yeah.
18-month process of really working to get them
Hmm.
autonomous. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had several guests who have somewhat. I mean, your story is unique, but it reminds me of like Kevin Dahlstrom was on the show. He was making 1.3 million dollars a year at his,
Wow.
and he was a chief marketing officer for I think he worked for Mr. Cooper. I think he created the Mr. Cooper brand, but basically he found himself uh, grinding and making a lot of money, and wife and a couple kids, I'm not sure, but just wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and didn't need to be continuing to do that, because he
Yeah.
made a lot of money. And so, and I don't want to speak for him, but he talked about how he, in a sense, kind of had a reset, and what some people might call a midlife crisis, but he called it a
Yeah.
reset. And he moved the family to Boulder, Colorado, because he
Mhm.
likes to climb rocks.
Yeah.
And then, similar to you, he started a new venture after maybe a month, because I think he was a little bit bored. Um,
Yeah.
so
That
that's
happens.
one. But I've had other guests on who have been removed from their business, who, oftentimes through not their own doing, and
Mm.
it's kind of devastated the business, or really hurt things from a profit standpoint. So I really, what I'm getting is, you've, over the years, made a commitment to being intentional and strategic with your time and energy, and it sounds like it's paying dividends. At least that's one thing I'm pulling out. So yeah, I mean, so that's really good context for kind of the recent 7-year period. Is there
Yeah.
anything you want to add to today's the element of today, I guess, before we jump back into a little bit more of your background?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could just say that I can confirm for you that, money doesn't bring happiness. If you're somebody who's thinking that
Mm-hmm.
you're listening to this and you're thinking that it might, not that I'm unhappy, but um, a lot of my friends actually have had exits at this point. I'm in like a cohort of folks who started, 15
Mm-hmm.
years ago, and none of them started from anything.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them have 7 and 8 figures today. And I can tell you that the struggles with just relationships and children and the day to day and all of that kind
Mm-hmm.
of, like, none of that changes. Not one
Mm-hmm.
thing. Your stuff's a little nicer, um,
Right.
but um, but the feeling, what I haven't been able to get over is the feeling that now I have more money than I've ever had before,
Mm-hmm.
but the feeling that that could all disappear in a moment,
Mm.
just has never left me, and I don't know if it ever will. I didn't grow up
Mm.
with any money,
Mm-hmm.
um, and um, and I don't know what one has to has to do to get into a mindset where you
Mm-hmm.
just don't
You don't have
think
that
about it
fear. Yeah.
anymore. But I don't know anyone, no matter how much they have, who's comfortably in that
Mm-hmm.
spot mentally right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's we really like to keep it real on the show, and
Yeah.
not pretend that, if you have $10 million dropped into your lap tomorrow, that solves all your problems. And
Yeah. It
um
doesn't.
no, and sounds
Yeah.
like you can say that from experience. But
Yeah.
um but uh but but also, that doesn't mean you should bury your head in the sand and shy away from conversations about money. And to me, money is a very important topic. you
Mm.
know but absolutely, I agree that, certainly, I think money in and of itself, or wealth, it should be, personally, I think it should be viewed like, kind of like the internet, or you know something very powerful, but inherently not good or bad. Could be used
Yeah.
for very good purposes, or very bad purposes. That's just, my own kind of perspective.
Yeah. I mean, for
But I
me,
think,
it's about
go ahead.
security and time. Like, I want to know
Sure.
that I have control of my time and I can do what I want to do when I want to do
Sure.
it,
Absolutely.
and then I don't have to worry about the
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. That makes perfect
I'll
sense.
let
More
you know
about,
when I when I stop worrying about the money.
yeah. No, I hear you, though. It's more about freedom, time freedom, and
It is.
control of choices, and your life, really.
Yeah.
But so let's jump back and dive into, I know you mentioned something before, the other day to me,
Yeah.
some financial struggles you've had, and we can certainly pivot and talk about other struggles. But if you would, let's kind of jump back to whatever time frame you want to start with, but really
Sure.
focus on some personal adversity that you've been through. And again, the goal is
Sure.
to pull out lessons learned and maybe things that you've been able to apply to your own perspective on life or your business, or there is, we're trying to make it somewhat of a practical show as well,
Yeah.
other than just talking about people's problems. We want to
Sure.
try to help people, and so I think you get
Yeah.
the point. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's jump back. Where do you want to start?
Sure. I'll go all the way back. Um, my my first business I bought when I was 15 with a neighbor of mine, and it was a bike shop. And it was the neighborhood bike shop. It had been on our street for 25 years and had changed hands twice. And the owner was a young guy who's this is in the 80s. So um, everything was different at that. And we bought it for $3,500, which is basically like a collection. It
Wow.
was like some relationships with vendors and a collection of like dirty parts. And so we did that and grew that. And I was always working, 2, 3 jobs and just really like industrious, but was never really very good with money,
Mm,
and was not. I had a real procrastination kind of problem.
mm,
Wouldn't face paperwork and that kind of thing, which plagued me and just dogged me all through like my early 20s in
mm,
a big way, to the point where I'd get eviction notices for not paying the rent. I had a car repossessed when I
mm,
was 21,
mm,
and all just sort of being like not keeping my eye on the ball and not being able to like face the finances,
mm,
um, and and that really dogged me for a long time. And it took like some really abrupt stuff happening in my early 20s to change that and to get me
mm.
to grow up a little bit.
Right, right.
So
So just before we get to the kind of major, adversity there, um, do you think what was causing those? I mean, was it you weren't making enough money, or you were spending too much money, or you just were disorganized, or all of the above?
I was disorganized and I just had a problem facing money, dealing with money. And I think, if I'm, well, now it's going to be like a therapy session, Jamie.
I always
I
say
think if
we can
I,
edit things, but we rarely do.
yeah, if I had to go back
um,
there and really think about it, I grew up in a house where, his parents are divorced and had step kid, step siblings and all this kind of thing.
mhm,
And it was a situation where, my father did pretty well. My mother and her new husband did not. And there's money tension all the time.
mm,
And I think that for that reason, I just didn't want to face it. I
sure.
like just dealing with the subject of it
Yeah.
was difficult.
Okay.
I was good at making it,
Hmm.
but I just had no idea what to do with it.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So,
All right.
or how to manage it. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you said, I think you mentioned your early 20s.
Yeah. So fast forward a little bit, we get into the later in the 20s. I got into direct sales, which was really good for me. And then mostly in software, got recruited to a company, a startup out in San Francisco in 1999 to lead their Northwest sales for Fortune 1000 accounts. Turns out we didn't have any product. It was vaporware, and then the dot-com crash happened,
hmm
right? So
hmm
out of work again, and I decided to get into real estate. So started in real estate in 2001 or 2000, and really started at the bottom, doing just like rentals, like running around turning keys on Newbury Street in Boston, doing rentals work like that.
you were an agent, you're saying?
Yeah, I was an
Yeah.
agent. Yeah, I
Okay.
had an uncle who did really, really well. At least
Hmm
it appeared to me. He's very
hmm
wealthy.
Sure.
Had a downtown, penthouse and all that kind of stuff. And he just was selling real estate in Boston. I
Hmm.
said, that looks pretty
Yeah.
good. I think,
Sure.
I
Looks
think I should do
glamorous.
that.
Yeah.
Um, and things went pretty well. I quickly moved into the investor niche. So worked with a
Hmm.
lot of investors, and that 2001 to sort of 2006, 7 timeframe, it
Hmm.
was find anything that you could possibly convert to condos or
Mm.
subdivide,
Yeah.
do that at some stage, whether it's just the paperwork or they're fully finished, sell them, and repeat, keep moving. That and multifamily sales is a lot of what I did,
Hmm.
which is going great. And then 2006, I remember I had this deal where it was this like old folks home, like a assisted
Hmm.
living type
Yeah.
place, big
Senior living.
beautiful,
Yeah.
yeah, senior living, big beautiful place in Malden, Massachusetts. And it was going to be a great conversion as far as we were concerned into condos. They were selling it, and we had did a private offering to a group of investors that we knew, and we ended up with like 10 offers, and multiple offers were with they had 100% financing. They were bringing nothing to the table, and it was all hard money. And the values that they had in mind for the exit on it were way out of control. And I was like, all right, this is officially bubble town. Like we're
Sure.
definitely like that's where if this is how easy, like everybody with a hammer in a van is
Yeah.
now a developer and they have unlimited money.
Yeah.
So
If you
that's
can
weird.
fog a mirror, you can get a loan.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's,
yeah,
I mean, of course, in hindsight, it's easy to talk like this, right? But you're saying you
yes.
saw this at the time. You're
I
like, this
did.
is, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I did. And so what I did was I got positioned, and I got my auctioneer's license, and I was like, well, who's going to have all the game when this happens? And it's going to be the
Mm,
banks, right?
sure.
So I did that, and I teamed up with a great firm called Transon Auction Properties. I ran their Southern New England territory, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Um, and that was awesome, except for the interim, which was like
Hmm.
2007 till 2000, like 9 or so. Because
Hmm.
this doesn't, it's not like a switch flips
Sure. Right.
and they
Right.
start selling, right? So having foresight didn't change the fact that in 2008 I went from my last year in like traditional real estate sales. I think we're just over 200, like 220,000 or something like that. The next year, um, it was 19,000. Did
Mm.
all the same amount of
Wow.
work and made like
Yeah.
$19,000,
No, my
which doesn't
father
even
was a
cover
realtor.
what's that?
I was just going to say my father was a realtor growing up.
Yeah,
And so I've, you know, pretty closely experienced the ups and downs, and he would bust his butt. I mean, he worked really hard, and
yeah,
some years it didn't matter.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
like you're one year you're rolling in it, and then next year you're not barely able to pay the mortgage. So I can relate, from watching him through, all those years. So yeah, it's a tough business. Can be rewarding, but also
Yeah.
there's a downside. So
I mean, it was horrible. I had a condo project going on, had tons of debt on it. I had a new brokerage that I had opened up, leases. At that time, that's when you would still lease copiers for $600 a month,
mm, yeah.
and office space and all that kind of stuff. If you go back and you think about 2006, 7, 8,
Hmm.
that time frame, we're in a very different place in terms of how business runs.
Hmm.
So I had all these expenses. I had tons of debt, uh, and I had no revenue at all
Mm.
for a couple of years. Not at all, but felt like not at all after because by that time now I've got I had a child and I had another one on the way,
Mm.
and I took a real estate, like I'm 100% in real estate, heading into the global financial crisis
Hmm.
with leverage was a terrible
Mm. So
place to be.
the
So
leverage and the debt you just mentioned, that was all kind of personal or mortgage, or was it business debt or
it was mortgage. Yeah, it
mortgage?
was
Okay.
the cost of flipping this condo
Got it.
project.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Understood. Okay.
yeah. And so kind of deep into that, I had a partner. My partner went bankrupt, and then I against like I decided, okay, well, I'm going to keep going. The right thing for me
Hmm.
to do right then would have been to have strategically defaulted, to have just said, okay, like I'm going to I'm going to start anew. But I
Hmm.
didn't.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, I had in my mind, the idea that I had somehow put some like moral or ethical,
Label or
weight
yeah.
on this decision to continue to pay these things that were obvious losers at that time. There was no
Mm.
the if I was going to get any of that money back, it was going to be in a decade. It wasn't going to be,
Hmm.
it wasn't going to be in any time soon. So just quickly becoming insolvent. And what I should have done is I should have filed right then, but I didn't. I
Hmm.
persisted for another year and a half, and then um, it was bad, man. I had nothing. We My kids are born. My first two, I have three. My first two were born 21 months apart, and it was headlong into a bankruptcy and a
Mm.
foreclosure and a short sale.
Mm.
Moved in with my mother,
Mm.
um, which I don't know if there's anything more embarrassing than moving in with your mother, with your wife and two babies.
Right.
I mean, it was I'm all
Yeah.
choked up like talking about
No,
it.
I can't. I mean, that's a lot of that's a lot. There's a lot of pressure there. There's
Yeah,
and I think probably, and this was probably before you know, I think it got a little more, became a little bit more common after that to maybe for younger adults to move back in with their parents. But
yeah.
there's, yeah, that's,
Not in
that would
that way
be
at that time. It
not in
wasn't.
that way at
It
that
wasn't
time.
great.
All right. That's
I think
beyond humbling. Yeah.
for a
Um,
lot of folks at my age at that moment went back for masters. They went back and I'm going to go get an MBA
right.
and ride
Sure.
this out. I mean, I guess that works. Not if you're as deep in a business as I was. That was so
Hmm.
ravaged by by the global financial crisis. So
Yeah. Well, and how did that affect your, obviously we don't want to beat you up, and that's not the point of
I
like
know
the,
it's
the
fun.
show, but
It's fun.
how did that affect, what was your wife saying, what was, what were the family circumstances at that
Yeah,
time?
my wife is a rock.
Yeah. Gotcha. No, that's, I mean, yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like you've been through some real pain there. So
Oh, you
um
stirred it up, Jamie. Look at
I
that. Yeah, she's a
think,
rock. What happened was, I mean, I turned work up to 11. I worked day and night
to get out of that situation.
all the time.
Gotcha.
The auction started kicking in finally, and I would be on the road. I'd do 1,000 miles a week. I'd be on the road from 7 a.m. till 5 or 6 p.m. And then I got the idea that I wanted to do something online, and so I started looking around for how do I do that, and started listening to
Hmm.
podcasts and following
Hmm.
stuff. And then I found myself in July of or June of 2009. I was at this thing called the American uh, Bankruptcy Institute Symposium. So that's where you meet lawyers who are handling bankruptcy cases. And when you're an
Hmm.
auctioneer, that's who you want to know, because the
Hmm.
counsel is who makes that whole thing go. Counsel, like bank
They control.
counsel,
Yeah.
is, yeah, they're in control. They like any of the debt that they're selling or who they pick to liquidate that stuff. That all, like, they are major gatekeepers for that. Also,
Got it.
bankruptcy sales can be very good for an auctioneer. So that's a whole other discussion. But
Mm.
I was at this boring thing at Bretton Woods, and I had been listening the whole way up. I was listening to podcasts, and then really the only thing for an auctioneer to do at a bankruptcy symposium is to go to the bar in between things to try and meet people and buy them a drink. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So the rest of the time, I kind of holed up in my room, and I read the 4 Hour Work Week.
Mm. Yeah.
and it's so cliche, but this is exactly what happened. Was I read the 4 Hour Work Week that weekend, or it was 2 days, probably a weekday,
Yeah.
and listened to podcasts on my way back home, and then I decided that's it, I'm doing this,
Hmm.
and had an idea. I did a quick test of it, and the idea was, okay, if I am if I'm looking for these deals from the banks, then
Hmm.
somebody else is, I know a lot of people in real estate. They are looking for deals in banks. And I
Hmm.
had discovered through some of my training that I got with the auction company that I was associated with,
Hmm.
the FDIC data. And I
Hmm.
can't really, actually, I have an NDA from my last
Hmm.
company, so I can't get into a lot of detail
Hmm.
about, like, I can't produce any free or paid content about sourcing non-performing notes or REO direct from banks.
Sure.
That's like
Gotcha.
basically what my NDA says.
Okay. Well,
Um,
let's end the show right here because.
but basically, there's a bunch of data out there, and I knew where it was and how to get it and what it meant. And so I took it and I started packaging it and trying to sell it as a PDF. And on my very first try, I sent out a friend of mine actually sent out an email for me to his list, and I sold like $800 or $900 of this PDF. It was like a 150-page PDF
Hmm.
that has each bank and all of their, all their stuff on it.
Hmm.
And I said, all right, well, that's going to work, I think.
Hmm.
And I managed to scrape together like not a lot of money, I think $3,000, something like that. And I had a
Hmm.
prototype built. And so on August 31st of 2009, I had my first software product. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no technical skills whatsoever.
Hmm.
I I was completely on a wing and a prayer, and that was distresspro.com. My first user, it was me on August 31st, 2009.
And you had no technical background,
No,
really.
none. Yeah,
Okay. Because
none
I think, I
whatsoever.
mean, nowadays it may be more common, you would know better than I would, but more common to be able to do something like that. I'm not saying it's easy, but
Yeah,
you can approach something,
it's
they're
way easier.
way easier, right? Because
Yeah,
most
yeah,
people that would have done that would have a technical background and created,
yeah.
back there coding all night and figuring it out. But I think nowadays you can outsource the technical piece a lot more easily, I would think.
You can. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what, and so the bankruptcy event that you were at was strictly for your professional career. It had no tie into your personal bankruptcy, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're somebody who's looking to do distressed deals with lenders, then the Turnaround Management Association, that's TMA.org, or the American Bankruptcy Institute, those are two groups or associations where you want to go be kind of in that mix.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you saw that this was probably going to work. Now you've got, sounds like you've got
Well,
some
I
hope.
hoped it would work.
You well,
I
hope,
don't know
right?
about
You've got
probably.
hope, but there's a chance this could work.
Yeah, there's a whiff of it.
Which is
Yeah.
maybe more than you had previously, right?
Yeah. I mean, what I really wanted was regular, recurring, monthly income.
Yeah,
It's great to go get a 50 or $80,000 check doing a deal. That
sure.
feels awesome. It
Right.
feels better to have 10 or $20,000 coming in every single month. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
there's not, it's those two things aren't equivalent. I mean, I can remember in the final days of my brokerage where we were pushing this $2.5 million multifamily deal through, and the guy he owned a bunch of property, but he's terrible with his credit, and he had like not paid some medical bills, and we're like in the 11th hour on this deal, which is the commissions from which were
Hmm.
desperately needed. My wife's
Hmm.
post dating checks. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that is not a good feeling.
Right.
And yeah, we did end up closing that,
Mm.
and it was a big sale, and yeah, that was awesome. But the
Right.
stress involved with that versus
Right.
like just money coming in every month
Right.
is
Well,
huge.
and it's not only the unpredictability and the volatility, but also the fact that you're also pivoting your mindset to from a job to a business.
Yeah,
That's, at least that's my own. I could be
yeah,
putting words in your mouth, but I mean, I think that for those big checks typically you're really working at, whether you own a business or not, you're really working hard for those big checks.
Yeah.
Whereas you're at this point in your life, it sounds like you were trying to be intentional about with that 4 hour work week mindset, and making it more of a recurring, more passive. You can debate all day if there's ever actually any such a thing as truly passive income.
Yeah,
But
there isn't.
you're right. I would
Yeah,
agree with that. But there's a lot of gray, and there's
there
a,
is.
there's a
Yeah,
spectrum.
for
Um,
sure.
so you've pivoted your mindset, and and tell us what you can about Distress Pro from when it started. You essentially already did in the beginning, but just bring us
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
through
So
today.
here's the arc is basically August 31st is the first user, and I started a podcast at the time, and I started just going to speaking events. I'd go to any kind of real estate event. And so in late October of that year, I got my first paying user. His name was Mark Ostroff from the back of the room in Providence, Rhode Island Real Estate
Nice,
Investor Association type meeting. I,
nice.
did the presentation and then, went to the back of the room and,
Yeah.
signed him up for 80
Which,
bucks a
by the
month.
way, it sounds like you'll never forget the details of that first
Yeah.
customer. But I mean, the fact you've mentioned podcasts 3 or 4 times, and this
Yeah.
nowadays it's, you know, we all have podcasts, right?
Yeah. I
But
guess
back
so.
then it was pretty uncommon. I mean,
It was uncommon, and it got me noticed really quickly and put me on the
mhm,
map really quick. Um, so that I just started interviewing guys I knew
mhm,
in the area who were doing good business, and that was sort of the start of it. And then once I
mhm.
posted that on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. I've been on LinkedIn long enough that my handle on there is just slash my first name. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah,
quite a while.
nice.
Um, and um, and yeah, so I started like that. Then I sort of discovered SEO, but basically from 2009 to 2000 to fall of 2012, I think also October 2012. I just worked my ass off. I did auctions all day, and I did the new business all night. And my wife and I slept in separate rooms, and
Mm,
because we had two babies, and I was
mhm,
just working, working, working all the
mhm,
time. And then in 2012, I reached 8,000 a month in recurring revenue, and I said, "All right, like I'm just gonna step off. I'm gonna take this leap and see, if I can really go for it."
mhm,
And 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 I did that. In the following, it was like days or a week. I was on this host called Media Temple, and I got hacked, and
mm,
they whoever hacked me started like sending spam, like
mm,
banking spam type messages,
mm.
and Media Temple just shut it off. The whole site and everything just like shut
Wow.
the whole thing off, and I was like, "What's
You,
happening?" And they're like, "Well, you've been spamming people." I'm like, "It's not me," and they're like,
right.
"No, we can see that it came from your IP address." I'm like, I'm a not technical
Right.
person. I don't know
Right.
what the hell's going on, at
Right.
all. Um, and that was horrible. I was down for about 3 days.
Hmm.
This was just after terminating everything else that I was doing, and they wouldn't even turn it back up. So that at that time I was too dumb to even have like proper backups. What
Hmm.
I should have had is a way to just turn it on somewhere else. I didn't have that. I did when I was done, when before I sold, but at that
Hmm.
time I didn't.
Hmm.
And it was like it was an existential moment. Like that was
Hmm.
like that very well could have been it. I ended up finding an amazing guy from Egypt actually,
Hmm.
who was able to like take the little pieces out and put them back together
Hmm.
and got us stood back up. Um, but yeah, so then it started growing, faster when it got
Hmm.
my full attention. And that kind of brought us up to 2014, where I'm
Hmm.
crying in my office in New England in February.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you say about what's your take on just the overall view? What's your view of, I guess, hustle culture? I guess like, what I'm getting at is you have kind of, well, nowadays everything's so polarized. You have two sides to and
Yeah.
only two sides
Yeah.
to everything.
Yeah,
But,
really.
you know, I guess, you've been through periods where you've had a lot of ups and downs. You've had a lot of periods where you've worked extremely hard, and then it
Yeah.
sounds like some periods where you have been a lot more passive. Um, do you think it's possible to get to sort of passive income or essentially, a passive business without putting in that extreme amount of work? Because I guess what I'm saying is you get a lot of successful business people who talk about, or anti hustle culture and
Yeah.
talk, but it's like, yeah, but you put in 10, 15 years of a whole lot of work.
Day and night. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you have anything to add there.
I'm a big believer in systems, and I try to do things only once. Anytime that I'm approaching any work that I'm doing, like in the business that I'm starting now, everything is new, right? I've never run a media company, and I've never had, daily deadlines and all this kind of thing. And so everything that I do, I approach it with, okay, I'm about to do this, but if it weren't me doing this,
Mm-hmm.
how would somebody else do this? How would I tell
Mm-hmm.
them how they can do this
Mm-hmm.
correctly,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can hand that thing off every single time? So
Mm.
I never now, I mean, this is a hard one lesson. Like this wasn't something that I
Yeah,
was like, oh
you
yes,
haven't
that's
been doing
everything I'm
this,
going to do. It's repeatable,
right? You haven't been doing
Um,
this since you were 15, or since you bought the bike shop. You weren't
yeah.
doing
I
that at that
mean,
time.
my first business that made any money was the real estate business started in 2004 or six or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other ones I was just working. I was working in the business all the time. I wasn't working on the
Mm-hmm.
business.
Mm-hmm.
But since our road trip,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very focused on working on the
Mm-hmm.
business.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I do think that, and it all comes down to people. You can do
Mm-hmm.
you can do a lot of sort of automations and that kind of thing. But at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, you're going to have some
Mm-hmm.
really competent people whom you love who
Yeah.
can execute the way that you need them to execute,
Yeah.
so that you can delegate to them. But I look at anything that I'm doing and I want to first eliminate it if it is not providing any value. If it can't be eliminated, then I want
Mm-hmm.
to automate it. If it can't be automated, then I want to delegate it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of how I approach any of the things that I'm doing. And then I want to systemize all of that so that each time anybody's going to go and approach that, they're going to follow that system, and then if that system needs to be improved, then we're going to improve that, but we're not
Mm-hmm.
going to do things without a system at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how you get to sort of passive income or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Gotcha.
where you can have, like the business that I sold, we had systems on how we talk about things, when do we talk about them, where do we talk about them, and what
Mm-hmm.
things are worth talking about, like
Mm-hmm.
down to like every last little nook. And that is a way that once you do that and people buy into it and they're on board, that's
Mm-hmm.
how you have 2 half-hour meetings a week and everything stays on track.
And that was
Because
the last 18 months of the business is what you
Yeah, that
were.
was the last 18 months of the business. It wasn't like that before that. I was probably still putting in a day or two, maybe sometimes a little more
Mm-hmm.
a week. But definitely the last 18 months, because I just made a commitment. I was like, if I'm ever going to sell this, my name and face are all over the thing. I'm on the
Right.
videos, I'm on the, all
Right.
this kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's going to have to stand on its own legs.
Sure. Yep.
And so with that in mind, then anything that I do
Yep.
can't have to be done, but
Yeah.
it
By
has to
your.
be able to be done by somebody else.
So can you say approximately how much you were making in income in the last couple years before you sold the business? You don't have to give us exact
Yeah,
numbers.
over 300. thousand
and not
for
working a
net
whole lot. That's
revenue. Yeah. The thing about software businesses is they're really high margin,
sure.
especially as you get a little bit bigger. Because
Scale.
for me
Yep.
to, if I've got developers and support and a marketing manager, if I have 1,000 customers or 10,000 customers, it's not
It's
that
just
different.
almost the same amount of work,
Yeah,
right?
it's almost the same amount. So I didn't
And
have that many
cost.
customers, but yeah, the scale is
Sure.
there. So, yeah.
Gotcha. That makes
There's
total sense.
the the bit selling that business felt like a big deal and felt like a lot of money for about 5 minutes, you
Hmm.
know. But it's really peanuts compared to,
Hmm.
I think, what's possible out
Hmm.
there and what a lot of people are achieving. So there's always that, like, what else could I
Hmm.
do, or what else could I
Hmm.
achieve? And that just it doesn't go away. There's not. I have a friend who just sold a business for mid eight figures,
Hmm.
and 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 we were in a group where I have a number of masterminds that I'm in,
Hmm.
and it's been
Hmm.
one of the things has been huge for me
Hmm.
over the years. Some of them have been on for 7 years, 8 years. Um, and he's in one of them, and so I know his business very intimately, and
Hmm.
his life, and all that kind of thing. And he has this big exit, and um, his life really hasn't changed. Like he got a new bicycle, and there's it's and that's kind of how it is. It's like, okay, well, we still have kids. They're still gonna, like, I still got to get to practice, and they've got to,
Right.
like, life is still just doing what it's doing. So, you
Sure.
know, yeah.
So now you're onto we'll talk in a few minutes about your current venture, but
Okay.
what would you say, what's for you, what's the driving force then at this point? Is is it making more money? Is it proving to
Yeah.
yourself what you can accomplish? What
Yeah.
drives you right now?
For me, it's security. And the financial security of my family. That might sound like a lot of money to, but in the grand scheme of things and the way that money is going,
Hmm.
and all that, it's actually not very
Hmm.
much. And I think that if we're talking about, I'm 40, how old am I? 48, I guess.
I'm
I've got a
46.
long
I
road.
have to remind myself every so often, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, well, and granted, it's easy for me to just say this, but you seem like someone who knows how to reinvent yourself, and so even if you lost it all, heaven forbid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Heaven
feel
forbid.
like you could, you'd recover, and um,
So there's this
let's.
saying that it's like a stoic saying that I heard Tim Ferriss say, where what you do is you sort of get you will sort of downgrade yourself and
Mm,
to more subsistence, at least in a
hmm.
small way. What I did was, about a week ago, I just drove off with no schedule and camped and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And you just, like, eat beans and don't
Hmm.
wash, and all the while asking yourself, is this the condition that I so feared?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
when you really get down to it, as I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and it's cold and it's wet and
Yeah.
I'm in a tent or whatever, it's like, you know, is this the condition that I so feared?
Sure.
And I think that really helps to, like, recenter,
That's really good.
and bring it home.
Yeah.
So
That's really good. The episode that should be out right before this one, I interviewed, his name's Clint Fiore, and he crashed his plane and almost died about 20 years ago. And
oh,
that's
wow.
not to say he has no problems or no anxiety anymore, but he was talking about just replace what if with even if, and it's a
Yeah.
more similar thing what you're talking about, and just kind of saying, well, even if this happens,
Yeah.
I'll be okay.
I'll be okay. Yeah,
you know
absolutely. And I think that's really how folks have to think about it. We spend a lot of time painting these, pictures and making these movies in our heads about all the terrible things that are,
Hmm.
could or are going to, happen to us, and that really sacrifices the now, which is too bad because that's all that there
Sure.
is. Which is
That's
something
yeah.
that I've really tried to focus on over the last few years, is just to be like to be present, which is, I
Hmm.
think, the should be a goal for anybody
Yeah.
all the time.
I
Yeah.
think it's hard too for especially for entrepreneurs who tend to be, type A strivers, and I'm always thinking about the next
Yeah.
goal or the next,
Yeah.
next step. And
Well, if you are, at
uh,
least make it a goal and make it a vision, and not make it a fear and a
a fear.
worry.
Sure.
And,
Sure. That's true.
yeah.
Yeah. Good point. So as we head towards the end here, I'm going to fire off a few rapid fire questions.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Like I said, we can edit things out. Um, what's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
Huh. That's an interesting question. I try to be real transparent and open
Hmm.
in my communication. Anything that I put online and all that, I try to be real honest. I think probably because I have this audience that I've had for so long and have had my face out there, I think people think that, I think it probably looks like, well, I don't know what it looks like. I think it probably looks like I'm just easily successful or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the case. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing I've wasted tons of money. I've done
Mm.
huge numbers of just like stupid, wasteful things that didn't amount to anything. It was not a
Hmm.
smooth thing. So it was not the like success or whatever else has not been a breeze.
Yeah, no, that's very, that, I like that. That's really good. Keeping it real. So,
Yeah.
if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would that be?
I would have invested much sooner in longer term stuff. I would
Okay.
have been saving all the time. I was not an awesome saver until after I went bankrupt.
Hmm.
And so I would have been saving the whole time.
Got it.
And the other thing I would tell myself is that no one's going to give you permission. I feel like in the beginning part of my life, I would have like great ideas, or for business and that kind of thing, and then I would get stopped by self-doubt
Mm.
because I didn't have the degree, or I didn't have the whatever the
Hmm.
pedigree
Hmm.
to do the thing that I wanted to do, and I would slap that right out of
Mm.
myself if I could.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, no one's. Yeah, that's good. I have nothing to add. If you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would it be?
Well, my default on the historical figure question is Ben Franklin.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, if you had to write one book in the next 12 months, what would the topic be or the title?
Hmm. I guess it'd be letters to my children.
Okay, nice. It's really good. How about one meal? If you had to pick one meal to eat for the rest of your life, what would
Oh,
that be?
jeez. what, whatever I just ate last, I guess, is I'd probably be happy with. But
There you go.
um,
Beans,
geez,
right?
it would be
Beans in
it'd
the
be
woods.
a salad with grilled meat.
Okay, nice.
Yes.
Um, so as we pivot towards talking about your current venture and then
Yeah.
wrapping up the show, what's one struggle or challenge that you're facing in your business right now?
Hmm. Um, the strategies and tactics that I used to grow Distress Pro
Hmm.
successfully are not the same
Mm,
that will grow my current venture. And so
okay.
I'm having to learn a bunch of new stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Got it. All right. Well, let's talk about what is your current venture and how do you see that playing out in the next few years?
Sure. So I've got a fast, fun, irreverent daily newsletter. It's a daily update for investors. And so basically, On Monday, we're going to cover what is important to keep an eye on for the rest of the week. And Tuesday, we start to investigate a little bit into an investment theme. And Wednesday, we take a look at the data around that. And then Thursday, we have a call or an interview or a deep dive on an alternative investment fund platform or strategy where we really get into that. And then on Friday, we kind of wrap up the week and talk about what to look for the next week. I try to make them, we try to make them like really fun, 4 minutes flat. It's pretty irreverent. It's kind of a punch in the face. Sometimes don't hold anything back in there. And so that's what that is over there. I'm hiring right now, a content manager and a social media manager and some other roles. And yeah, so it's free. What I see happening on the back of that is some community and some joint investments into, probably funds like yours. And yeah, so that's the idea over there at Alt Reports.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Alt Reports, and can people sign up for your newsletter there?
Yeah, go to altreports.com, and there's a bunch of ways to sign up. You'll find once you get there, and it's free. If it's not for you, after you subscribe, unsubscribe, no hard feelings. But I've had a great response. We have tremendous open and click through rates, and really some fantastic replies. And I'm getting to engage and meet a lot of folks in investing who are doing some really cool stuff that I look forward to like bringing to the fore each week. So.
That's great. So what's the main profit center for you there?
Sure. So we're going to have some sponsorship to start. And then I see on the back of that, like probably there's some community, and there might be a fund or a fund of funds or syndicate or, that kind of thing behind there. A lot of what we do talk about is for accredited investors only, but it's not exclusively. And we're working to, find more opportunities that are less restrictive.
Yeah. Gotcha. Got it. Kevin Dahlstrom. You should go listen to that episode. It's really cool. He's working on a company called Swell, and part of what they're working on is opening up private investments for non-accredited, making it a little more, I guess, democratic, if you will.
That's great.
But yeah, where can our listeners find you? Any other places besides altreports.com?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Brecht, BRECHT. Or if you just type in BRECHT Palombo, there's not a lot of us in there. And you can find me on Twitter, but I don't do too much over there. But I am checking my LinkedIn there every day. So yeah.
Got it. Awesome, Breck. Well, I know we went a little bit long, but you only work 4 hours per week, right? So.
No, that was the old business. Now I work again, 50 hours a week. So.
I was just giving you a hard time, but thank you so much for being vulnerable and talking about some painful personal periods in your life, and I do appreciate that, and I know our listeners will as well. So thanks again.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, thank you all for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.